Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's virtual event, Reimagining Interfaith in 2020. My name is Shauna Morin, and I'm a research fellow at Interfaith Youth Corps, and I'll be hosting today's event alongside my colleagues, Catherine O'Brien and Cara Hargrader. To get us started, I want to share a little bit of a foundation for why this event came to be, and that involves a study called the Interfaith Diversity Experiences and Attitudes Longitudinal Survey, or IDEALS. IFYC has been in partnership with researchers at The Ohio State University and North Carolina State University since 2015 to execute IDEALS at a number of campuses across the country. In total, we surveyed students from 2015 to 2019 at over 100 colleges and universities. And we asked them questions about their experiences on campus with the religious and spiritual climate. We asked about their experiences with interfaith in and out of the classroom. And we asked a number of questions to assess their attitudes and values about religious diversity and bridging religious divides. Last summer in August, we released the national report that summarized findings from this study. And since then, we've been digging deeper into those findings to think about what implications they might have for campus practice. So today's event was really born out of curiosity at how we might engage some of the findings from that report in new ways by thinking about interfaith programming that's happening here in 2020. So I'd like to share a few data points with you to set this foundation a little more clearly. One of the things that we were really excited to see come out of IDEALS was that students across the board are highly committed to bridging religious divides. You might ask what that means. And when we talk about bridging religious divides, we're referring to students expressing that they respect people of other religious and non-religious perspectives, that they feel a sense of goodwill toward those individuals, and that they're committed to working together on issues of common concern with peers and others, regardless of religious or non-religious beliefs. 70% of the students that we surveyed by their senior year of college said that they were highly committed to bridging religious divides. Here on this slide, you can see that that finding nuanced a little bit based on how students identify their own religious or worldview perspective. And certainly we see that there are some opportunities for growth. Particularly, we would like to see that all students over the course of their college years are increasing their commitments to bridging religious divides. But by and large, we see strong majorities of students, even in their first year and all the way through to their final year of college, expressing this value. And that really serves as a strong foundation for engaging students in interfaith work. A little bit in contrast, when we started to ask students about their actual behaviors in college, we saw that the numbers dropped quite a bit. And so what you see here on the screen are a sampling of activities that we ask students about on the IDEALS survey. The things that we're interested in exploring with IDEALS is whether students are engaged in interfaith activities in and out of the classroom, informally, so more in social settings, and also more formal or structured activities. And that formal and interfaith engagement is what you're seeing represented here on the screen. And as you can see, fewer than 50% of the students we surveyed by their fourth year of college had participated in any of the activities listed here. But where we particularly see the numbers drop are around those activities that are explicitly developing interfaith competencies, such as interfaith dialogues, interfaith action, and diversity trainings. And so that gap was what we were really curious to dig into a little bit more between this high value or commitment for bridging religious divides and yet not seeing that value translated into action. As I mentioned earlier, the cohort that we studied in IDEALS started college in 2015 and graduated in 2019. So even at that time, this gap existed. And of course, now here in 2020, higher education is facing a whole host of additional challenges and wrestling with things that might make it possible for this gap to widen even further if interfaith is not prioritized on college campuses. We at IFYC are, of course, interested in thinking in new ways about how to close that gap. And in that vein, we recently published a piece on Interfaith America, which is our media platform, offering 5 reasons why, even in the midst of all that's going on right now in our world and on our campuses, interfaith is something important to think about prioritizing with college students. And so the program that we've prepared for today has invited three wonderful speakers from three diverse campus institution types to talk to us about programs that they are initiating on their campus that focus on interfaith and respond to some of these justifications for making interfaith a priority right now. So I hope that as you hear from our speakers today and learn a little bit more about the programs that they are developing, that it might inspire ideas for you and some creative thinking around what interfaith might look like on your campuses in response to some of the things that are evolving in our world in higher education and in our society at large.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation to come and speak. And happy to see that everyone's here and interested in this conversation. So yes, I'm Chris Clark. I'm the director in Office of Multicultural Student Affairs at the University of Miami. I've been in my role for about 8 months, and talking a little bit more about this grant opportunity and this project. My office, what we have done historically, we provide trainings for our students, some staff, a little bit of faculty, workshops. We manage a ton of the cultural celebrations on campus, and the main things we do are around programming for our students. Historically and traditionally undergraduate students, but there's other students at the graduate level and other levels that we engage. So that's what our office does. It's easier to do that now and collaborate across units because of the virtual nature that we exist in. And then the other thing that we do is also we provide advising and mentorship to over 30 multicultural student organizations, which is an interesting thing to do. But for this project, a lot of our programs focus on racial and ethnic diversity. And to explore the idea of intersectionality, I think we've done a decent job of doing that across various units and student affairs. However, when I was looking at the programming that we offer for this academic year, there seemed to be a gap, and we didn't have any programming or initiatives that focus on the intersection of racial equity and faith. And that's why this opportunity attracted me, not only just to do so to kind of, not check the box, but kind of account for some of the different ways our students identify, but also, in the climate of, polarization that was mentioned before, just the nature of siloing that exists in academia historically, but now even more so because of the virtual nature. We definitely want to be intentional around ensuring our students have spaces to kind of exist across silos. So, thinking about this proposal, you can see the slide there that has information, what stakeholders that we needed to engage. First, an organization that is advised by my office called the Unity Roundtable. That's a student organization that provides programming around racial justice issues, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's student-led and it's very diverse. We engage them around an idea of helping planning a conversation around this very topic. We also engaged our Chaplains Association, and under that association, there's a Miami Interfaith Council, and their impetus is around religious literacy and providing that to the University of Miami community. And they use the term countercultural as a way to interact with one another. And we thought that having their participation in this proposal would be great, and to put on conversations around religious and spiritual traditions. Once we have both those groups kind of on board, the culminating way in which we wanted to disseminate this collaboration is through a Students of Color Symposium. That's a 2-day event that has happened historically over the years at Miami. And it's a 2-day workshop for students to engage in dialogues that talk about the educational, personal, and professional, growth of students. And because of the climate of this year, the theme for this upcoming symposium in 2021 is around racial justice. So we wanted to allow that platform to be the way in which we share out this intersection between, racial equity and interfaith dialogue. To make this happen, we kind of work with the expertise and advisement of 2 university leaders, Dr. Miriam Lipsky, who's the Assistant Provost for Institutional Culture, and Dr. Renee Dickens-Callan, who is the Executive Director of Student Life. They both have worked, over the years on several committees when it comes to events, religious calendaring, funding, and resource sharing. And they also both are members of our university-wide Standing Committee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Dr. Callan is the co-chair of that. So when it comes to putting those pieces together, that was imperative for making that an opportunity. So when it comes to goals for the program, I think the slide is gone as well. I think you lost the slide. But for goals for the program, thank you. First, the main goal is just identifying students with an interest and experiences in exploring these ideas of racial equity, interfaith cooperation. Second is just in investing the time to develop them and ensure that they have the tools to put together a curriculum. And third is implementing and co-facilitating this curriculum at a seminar, which will be during the Students of Color Symposium. And we want to explore and use the We Are Each Other's framework from the Interfaith Youth Corps for the dialogue. And so the partnership will help us do that. We want to also bring in some community partners to help serve as co-facilitators on this various conversation. And so what we hope to achieve by that is just increasing the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes of students when it comes to this topic. And we will do that by conducting pre and post test surveys along the way. Long term, we hope that by the proof of concept of this idea can be taken on by my office and become a part of the initiatives and programs that we offer in the future for our student population. So, responding to the climate, we talked about the challenges that are faced in 2020. We know that there's continued issues of racial injustice. We know that students more so than ever now are in the space of activism. Students are feeling a sense of helplessness because of the virtual nature of their existence now in higher education. And students want an opportunity in this space to continue to advocate for things that are important to them. I think the idea of the dialogue piece that Interfaith Youth Corps offers, it's very innovative because it's interactive and it gives students an opportunity to work on Zoom platforms in more of an active versus passive way. As I mentioned before, there's a number of siloing or programming that exists now, and it doesn't take into account the intersectionality with our students. Our students either have to choose between one or the other. And we as administrators and leadership create more spaces for our students to not have to choose between going to a program for racial and ethnic diversity or religious or faith diversity. And we should be able to think about bridging those things together and creating spaces for that. And then also the idea of providing an incentive for students to go. I think in our proposal, we wanted to have a raffle for some of the books, the Active Faith book, that can incentivize student participation, that explores the pluralism of students, and it'll assist with some of the silos or polarizing views that may exist now. So finally, I think the one thing I do want to say is when it comes to this whole Zoom world that we live in and Zoom fatigue and how programs have changed now and been put online, attendance for a lot of these programs, we struggle with it often, it's low. So, how have we kind of prepared to get students to come out to this type of collaboration and programming? I think the one thing that we are trying to do in our approach has been around incentives. We have a common book initiative that we put out, and we chose the book, So You Want to Talk About Race. And we had students come to a dialogue virtually, and we're using that same model. We had a great turnout, and the first 40 students that registered got to receive a copy of the book, and we used a chapter from the book to talk about, what if I talk about race wrong and microaggressions, and that was something that was very helpful. So incentives work for students. Again, the interactive nature of dialogues, the length of time. I think shortening the conversations with students, being intentional and mindful that students are on Zoom more often and being prompt helps. I think also kind of the collaboration with Teen Student Orgs. I told you we advise over 30 multicultural student orgs. By partnering with them and giving them a role to kind of promote this, it helps with the turnout, but also for student orgs to have skin in the game. The last thing I think I'll say about that is we have mentorship programs that exist, and some of the incentives for mentorship programs is to go to virtual programming with your mentee or mentor. So we incorporate some of these programs, and we hope to incorporate this one into a kind of a checkbox or requirement for mentorship programs for some of our students. So all in all, this is our proposal. You can see the three phases that we want to kind of explore with this. I think identifying student leaders, paying them a stipend for the work that they do, putting together this curriculum, studying and learning the ways in which they are developing so we can use that as a best practice, and allowing them to showcase their skills when it comes to the curriculum and co-facilitating these topics and having consistent and sustainable conversations after this seminar will allow us to really focus on bridging that gap between the racial justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and interfaith cooperation. So I guess that's my 5 minutes. So I'll stop there, but really excited and grateful that we did receive funding for this and can't wait to see it implemented. So thank you for the opportunity to share out.
Thank you so much, Chris. Terrific overview, right on time. I'm super impressed. I know 5 minutes is tricky, so we're grateful for your overview, and I will transition now to Angie Luo. And Angie is coming to us from the University of Southern California. And she will talk about a program they're doing in their business school. So Angie, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Shauna. So hey everyone, my name's Angie and I'm very honored to be here today. A big thank you to IFYC for funding this initiative. A little bit about me. I am what I like to call a triple Trojan because I, one, graduated from undergrad at USC in 2017. Now, two, work there full-time at the business school where I am, three, also a graduate student. And this year I attended the Virtual Interfaith Leadership Institute where I was really struck by the ideals research that Shauna touched upon earlier and that Ibu presented at the ILI. Especially showing how the religious aspect of identity is often left out of conversations about diversity and equity on college campuses. USC specifically is in a particularly special moment in time where, beginning with the inauguration of our first female president last year, there was a lot of hope for positive change. Then the pandemic happened and really pushed us all to examine our attitudes and policies around racial equity. And you can see on the slide in the top center, I apologize, it's very small, but it's the tall, skinny building with the globe on top. This is our VKC building. And I put it here because a small recent victory for student activists at USC is that after 15 years of protesting about this building being named after a eugenist, USC finally agreed to change the name. Yet at the same time this victory was being celebrated, we had one of our staff members quit partly due to having experienced anti-Semitic discrimination. I say this only to give you context, and I will also add to this that I'm in the second year of my master's program, which is a program for social entrepreneurs. I like to call it business school for hippies. In general, students are in my program because they care about social justice, social impact more than your typical MBA student. Yet something odd that I have noticed over time is the reluctance of students in my program to show any interest in social impact efforts as soon as the word religion is mentioned. So inspired by Ibu and with the acknowledgement that there is openness right now to racial equity work on campus, I reached out to Paul Lambert, who is actually here with us today. It's nice to see you here, Paul. And Paul works at the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation, where he regularly leads executive seminars at the intersection of religious and gender identity. I asked if he thought he could adapt the training a little bit to also talk about race, and he said yes. So this project will be a 1-hour workplace religious and racial equity training on Zoom sometime in the first 3 to 4 weeks of the spring semester. Paul is going to lead the training. I thought it was important to invite an expert with experience using research to lead the training instead of trying to create a training myself. And then a small group of students and alumni will host a series of follow-up sessions for participants who are interested in going deeper. A topic that Chris touched upon and that I think we're thinking a lot about as we're planning this training is also how to incentivize students to show up. So I'm working closely with my master's program student association, the MSSESA, to help promote the event and also to strategize about how we can market the training to be as appealing as possible, because we do expect the word religion will automatically turn some students off. This is actually why I originally asked Paul if he could incorporate race as more of a focus into the training. I did feel students would be more likely to be interested in racial equity than religious equity. And my program has about 120 actively enrolled students. Our training capacity will be for about 30 to 40 students. So another way to sort of incentivize participation is we might roll out the RSVP in waves of priority depending on student interest. So the first wave will keep open just for students that are currently enrolled in the MSSE. The second wave will open up to alumni in our program. And the third wave, we would open up to other master students in the business school. We're also thinking about creating a certificate for training attendees as a way to encourage participation, but definitely excited to hear everyone's ideas in the breakout rooms later about how to move this work forward.
Thank you so much, Angie. Appreciate hearing from you as well. And we're going to move now to our final presenter, the Reverend Beatrix Weil, who is a chaplain at Rhodes College.
Thank you so much, and just thank you for the opportunity to share. So Rhodes College is a small liberal arts college in Memphis, Tennessee. We have 2,000 students. And we're using this award to do kind of an art and accountability event. So in June 2020, right after police murdered George Floyd, there was kind of a week of reckoning for PWI's predominantly white institutions, because all these schools made these statements about how Black Lives Matter to them. And then their Black students said, well, it didn't feel like Black Lives Matter when this happened to me, or when this happened to this professor, or when this, incident happened. So it was kind of going on across the country. I'm sure that some of you, were involved on response teams to that. And Rhodes College's response was to have a day of action, which we spent the day posting opportunities for learning, opportunities for reflection, and then opportunities for action to do something with this energy that all of our alumni suddenly had, and try and focus that into turning that passion that they all felt in the summer towards something that would create a regular rhythm of practices that that save life. Truly, at the end of the day, is what we're going for. So what we're doing with this award is kind of a follow-up event to that at the end of the fall semester and at the end of the spring semester. We're going to have student artists. I'm an office of one. So we, the office of the chaplain, are going to have student artists create art that illustrates the intersection and interplay of their worldview tradition, spiritual tradition, or purposely secular tradition, and how that interacts with their commitment to racial justice and racial equity. And what we're literally doing with the money is paying a stipend, paying people for their art, because that's, I don't know, one of our values, I guess, and also paying for materials. So one of my artists is exploring her Jewish heritage through food, and she's going to bake something that illustrates the intersection of her Jewish identity and how racial justice is either important to her or how she's committed to that. So the events are going to be in November and probably April. So that's about 5 months, and then 10 months after this day of action, where, all these community members swore up and down that this is important to them, and it's kind of an accountability check-in. So we'll be able to say okay, you were really fired up. You all sent me 30,000 emails with resources that you wanted me to publish, so that other people could, reckon with, mostly with their whiteness. We're a PWI, the vast majority of our alumni are white. So this is going to serve as a check-in 5 months later and 10 months later. Where's that energy? What have you done with it? And if your life does not currently reflect that you value the life of people of color, specifically Black people, here's a time to dig back in and get back into it. And of course, as part of the week of reckoning that all PWIs were facing, we had our own, and this will be an opportunity for our diversity, equity, and inclusion, our team to say, here's all the things that we committed to, when you brought things to our attention, and here's how they're going, and here are the developments on that. So it's kind of I guess we call it a call in, just like an accountability check-in, and a way for students to also give language to what they're probably experiencing, but often we're affiliated with the Presbyterian Church USA, but I would say we're not really in the pattern of talking about how faith or religion or worldview impacts why we think the things that we do academically. So this will hopefully be an opportunity to listen to and even experiment with language and with art that illustrates that intersection. So we'll see how it is. I'm recruiting artists, and one question you wanted to make sure was how do we get students to participate? So we pay the student artists and then let them advertise it to the people, you know, who want to support them. And I think tying it to racial justice is really important too, because frankly, that is going to get more traction on our campus than interfaith cooperation and creation. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to share.